Okay, so now let's start with what is the case about? What is it about?
It's talking about Sun's CEO got into and the decision continues during a time that he was the CEO.
Okay. Anybody else?
Even when the decisions were proved wrong, he still had faith that what he did was right. In a way, not open to.
Okay, so if you have the CEO not open to ideas,
More of a case of the CEO's personality overshadowing the company, like something similar to Vijay Mallya.
okay, so now we talk about CEO personality. What else? The case is about CEO decisions, that's all. The case only talks about the CEO. There are a whole lot of things in the case.
The company's investment in R&D and the long-term visions.
So then we come to the company. What about the company's son? What about the company?
Its investment into R&D, its long-term horizon.
Investment into R&D, long-term horizon. So what does it say about it?
That willing to sacrifice short-term profitability for a long-term advantage.
So that is who wanted short-term profitability. So let's have managers.
The CEO thought what a competitor is doing is for and he feels that this is for the long-term benefit of Sun. Probably that is why also his decision that what he had to do and which worked for him in the past, he thought that was
Okay, so that means the CEO was not adaptable. Good. CEO not adaptable.
So this comes out as a classic case of you don't in the right direction, but you still stick with them because you believe.
So can we put overconfidence? You have an overconfident CEO. What did the press have to say about what does the press say about the CEO?
The press's perception was basically that because of his uncompromising nature, many key management executives were leaving the company. So that was also creating an HR problem.
Okay, so we have managers. Leaving.
This also says that there's nothing right and wrong because once Scott McNeely, because of his personality, the business was booming because Sun Microsystem was like brought from dust to like a big company, and it was by McNeely only. And I think it was because of his personality and because of his own pursuance that he was able to really do big. But then I think itself is because of now being adapted to the market, the ground. I think that also can be.
So he suffered from self-attribution.
But sir, because of this reason also he raised something to this video.
Correct. What is self-attribution is If good happens, it's because of you. If bad things happen, it is because of someone else. So you would say that is he suffering from that? Or if he did well, what was the reason? Means, no, I find this, your linkage on this is good. The CEO is saying that you believe that people are wrongly blaming him. So well, this thing in the case, wrong blame on the CEO. Correct, that's what you mean.
So from also perfusion of the letter, he did not, I mean, he just had a certain plan in mind or investing in R&D or whatever, and he started, listen to people.
So he was adamant not to listen to any information coming, so that is, he was not open to other ideas. Nobody told me what the press thinks of him. What are the adjectives used for Steve McNally in the case study? As we have learnt, what the press says is so important because a lot of decisions are made by people based on the press report. So what is the press thinking of him?
Say, some of the analysts have to say that you should batten down the hatches for the Stormlight/research because there was a lot of R&D expense that he had assigned. Lay off staffers and get serious about low-cost products. He was also not focusing much on low-cost products.
He was not focusing on low-cost products. So
Another notice, their sales doubled by 48% in the 3 years, and it lost 1/3 of its market share.
it's because of the focus. Market share. What are the adjectives used?
So they call him a very sharp mind and lack experience.
Okay, razor sharp mind. Sharp mind.
Lack experience, dealing with employees and customers with his attitude.
Arrogant.
This was Scott.
Beg your pardon.
That's of Scott, not from Magnet.
For
Scott.
arrogance is not for Magnet.
No, this is not from Magnet.
This was Schwartz.
Scott.
Okay.
So some of the adjectives that have been used for MBA are uncompromising determination, upfront irreverence, unblushing idealism. All these turned out to be critical flaws.
Yeah, all those adjectives which are used for strong, what does it signify?
So basically, it shows that he was a contrarian to the company. Even when everyone felt that he should leave, he thought this credibility, experience, and his nerve would bring the company back. That is what he believed. It was a contrary belief to what everyone else believed in the company. That is why many people, almost 30 people in his team, left because they didn't agree to what he.
Okay, so he was a contrarian. Do you think he was a contrarian for contrarian's sake, or did he really believe?
He believed it.
How do you say that just because he was opposite of everyone was talking, so you believe that he was a contrarian for the sake of thing, or he really believed, and what were his really strong beliefs? They are already there in Moya.
So because he was successful before when he was against everyone else, he thought that he would be successful again in the future. So these were the factors that made him believe that his contrarian approach was indeed going to work for the company.
Correct. Any thoughts on, he was in an era when craziness were going. Anybody has realized that he was in the tech boom era? Now if he was in the tech boom era, what was his thought process? Just go through that. It's all there. Contrary, he was in the tech era. And he was, because he was not open to other ideas, you find him a contrarian. Because he was in a very different environment. And they, in the case, they have been talking about that environment.
Another point here is the nature of the industry. It's constantly
there is no predictability in the kind of industry. So you have to be very flexible to alter your course of action.
Okay, good point. Let's talk about industry. You say it was short term, grossly changing. When it was grossly changing, what does it show? That the internet itself was grossly changing every time. So, what is the CEO thinking?
He was too rigid for the industry.
So, but still he has been a great performer, as he said. That in this line he should be knowing everything.
The first time he was right when he got the new software out. He thought that it's not because of the industry, it's because he's brilliant that he's able to do that.
Yeah.
That I should carry forward. That even now, like with that you can say it to wives, he thought because of his actions, the son did very well. But half of it was because of the industry. So even right now the industry is going against, but he's still thinking that I can change the course, but that's not possible. Just rolling the time will make you change it.
Correct. Yeah.
So but the statement that he says that internet has a high potential, he says that it is highly underutilized at that point of time in 2001. After the boom, after the crash, they went down, so people started blaming the .com this thing. But he says that the internet has a lot of capability, and now we can see that internet has become a big infrastructural this thing. So he had a vision, but probably in his execution and the situation didn't work out well.
How many would agree that he was a smart guy? How many would agree? Why others disagree? Because he's done such a great thing. How can we say that he was not a smart guy?
So he was too rigid in his acts. He should have been a bit adaptive to what the course.
Correct. But have you not read in the papers when they saying the press finds him cocky, arrogant? All these things are over there for him. That means, why did he get that thing? Because he was smart. So ultimately with all these things, let's not be negative. He was really smart. Did he know the internet industry well? His knowledge about the internet industry was well. Internet industry he knew perfectly well. Where did he go wrong?
Tactical mistakes when he chose to have the Sun servers running rather than taking the Intel ones, and when the market preferred Intel ones, they were faster. So that got over very easy. So there were some tactical mistakes. So he knew he was not just shooting the air. He had a rational way about it.
Correct. So now, when he did this, like we all know about it, why was he doing all these things? What was in his mind which was going on? Yeah.
He was a guy who was thinking really long term. But the question over here is, does that kind of approach actually work for an industry which is so dynamic? He refused to be affected by the changes in the industry. He refused to fire his workers initially. He refused to cut his R&D expenditure. Just continued to think long term. But the question is, did he push it too far? Should he have been a little more flexible earlier?
So you believe that he was also a long-term visionary? You're saying something? What about the economy? The way the economy was going during the internet time?
Their customers were looking at ways to cut costs. They were looking at it that cheaper one rather than insurable.
Yes. Did not listen to customers.
Being that Microsoft and other industry diverge into other line of business, while this company was just concentrating on server business. I think that was also the distinct point. Like it was too much risk increase with the one product only. It was also more a server business, right? Microsoft diversified into many other businesses and Intel was thinking of diversifying.
But he did go in for some acquisition.
No, again the acquisition was also for server business. So but it was again for server.
But that means if suppose had he diversified and if he would have lost, then you would say diversification was wrong. He should have kept his focus right.
So the diversification of the same product group, like here what I mean, the technology used in other products is almost similar. So you can use that product technology also.
No, so that means suppose if he was not listening to the customers, did he go wrong because of that? Where the market was going. See, there are two things he can do. One is how the market is evolving. If the market is evolving, if you listen to your customers, you know what do they want. And then you start going into those places. Secondly is that, oh, why did you not do that on a hindsight bias? You didn't do this, you didn't do this. But look at the case study. See, I want to discuss the case study, not the logic what he did or not. Because what we are trying to find out is what has happened that sun had gone up so much and it just went down. What has really happened? And what were the behavioral biases of the CEO as well as the managers when they are making these corporate decisions? Go to the fourth para. Time and again, McNary refused an economics major during his days at Harvard University. He was convinced that the economy would snap back quickly from its slump, insiders say. Plus, he believed that the net was so critical to companies that they couldn't hold off buying gear for long. The internet is still widely underhyped, underutilized and underimplemented, he said in 2001. I think we are looking at the largest equipment business in the history of anything. The growth opportunities are stunning. Preparing for the next upturn, he felt he was much more important than whittling expenses for a full brief. So, someone said he was looking long term. From this case, it is true. But he is looking at the internet economy. What reference or relevance do you see with the recession which followed and the internet economy? Can someone see certain things over there? Nobody touched on the subject of disruptive innovation. We are doing a behavioral economics class. We are doing this case study. So just go through the case study because a lot of behavioral anomalies we have just done. You think they are just coming out.
The very fact that he thought that we can get disruptive technology. He should have thought that the very fact that low cost was a company in the market, this itself is a disruptive technology and he should have woken up at that time rather than saying I'll come up with something more, something disruptive and change the trend. The trend was already changed. He should have seen that.
He didn't see the trend. Case, where should we see is converting industry? Did not see the trend in the industry.
It should be a corporate governance issue. In any other company, a CEO with such a poor track record will be fired very soon. If you're because you're one of the co-founders, I think he's been able to survive till despite so many bad decisions. So the owners choose to stay on and despite having not smooth decisions.
So the case is about corporate governance.
There are
Shades of corporate governance.
I think you for not recognizing that it being staff similar example we actually associate with so we could
He just ran out of luck. Good idea.
What we have known about Steve Jobs is very accommodating. Like he's not very stingy with the ideas. Like what he does is this: like, whenever he goes with the product and everything, he looks after the team. Even right now, you see, he had empowered his team pretty, in a really efficient way. As far as we know, because right now, even if he is not with the company pretty well, all the things that investor perception is changing that maybe Apple will not be able to perform as well. And secondly, we have also seen that Apple has not concentrated itself like, in one segment only, or like it has always diversified itself and always come with innovative products like in different segments also. It's not only that it's in the computer or not, it's just in music system, or it's not just in mobile, it's in many other divisions.
So, to another thing is success and failure. Okay, you believe that Tom McLean stock went down, that's why he was a failure, and you believe Steve Jobs' products are good, that's why. Something of that sort.
I just think that maybe
He's not.
he cannot be right always, and that's the problem. He has not been right always, and maybe he's wrong. He's not able to admit it. He's not admitting. So I think that's the reason.
Have you seen the stock price? There's a stock price movement given over here. What do you feel from the stock price? Why would a stock price really just go down? What were the behavioral anomalies that the stock price went up? What were the reasons? Someone says he ran out of luck. That's the reason stock price went down, or stock price just went down and it's because of him. Can we really say a CEO who doesn't do well, I ran out of luck? But the stock price is showing us something. Yes. See, nobody is right or wrong. When we are doing the case study, you all have their ideas. That's why there are no results in the case study.
By the look of it, the way the article has been structured, start itself, they say that he was then they use these what do you call unblushing idealism. All these
Good. That is what I've been always asking. What is the press say? What are the adjectives? Just read out the adjectives.
unblushing idealism.
Unblushing. Unblushing ideas.
Sharp-tongued irreverent.
Sharp.
Uncompromising.
Uncompromising. Now, all these are the adjectives the press is using for Steve. Now, when the press talks about what is the available information running into people, she made a good point that when they are talking about, so we are also tuned into thinking that there was something wrong with him. But there's other way of thinking is that if he is this, what are the other behavioral anomalies he could be suffering from? Along with this, if he is told all these things from all the behavioral anomalies which we have done, what do you think, what behavioral anomalies would be? Let's get to this. Talked about all these things. What does it tell us about the person?
Nature of co-confidence part. So Steve Jobs, he knew something that the rest of the industry did not know. He could predict.
Overconfidence.
So he was being intuitive with the decisions that he was taking, knowing that there was a trend for low cost products, still he didn't look definitely not excited.
Intuitive.
thought he is the one who did all of it.
An illusion of control he had. Which are the biases? There's so much in this case study. Just come out with anything, because everything will come out. If you start talking, then only things will come out.
So
Optimism, yes, how could you miss that actually?
So it also appears that Mr. McNeely had some ego problems with some people in Microsoft, due to which he delayed that deal that was signed in the later years.
Yes, I think that we are covering in all this, whatever attributes we have given. He has all those things. When you have an ego problem, what do? You don't take information which is coming to you. You underreact.
Self-serving bias. Self-serving bias.
Self-serving bias.
Whatever was happening right, he was saying it was good, but whatever went wrong was because of outside.
Self-attribute, I think, okay. Fifth, self-attribute. Go a step forward. Instead of finding faults with him, how are all these decisions, these anomalies affecting his decision making? Go a little deeper into that. Okay, he was like this, but then how would you relate to his decision making?
In this case, it's given that he had thought of quitting due to the tech boom. So basically, in that case, probably his legacy would have lived on. But then after that, son suffered. So he thought he was the only person. If he stayed in the company, then probably his son would come out of the situation. So his overconfidence, all these things, even though a person might not be relevant in the given scenario, because he wants his legacy to live on, that's probably preventing him from quitting and leading it to other managers.
Yes.
So also in earlier when this executive told him to not to drop the Motorola chips, that time he did not listen to him and dropped it and he was right. So this time just when the executive told him to cut back on spending, he thought he should not follow that decision because last time. So kind of that the previous decision was right, so he thought this decision also will be right.
Correct, yes. He lived on the past memories. Past memories. Past. With all these things, how is he getting swayed on not making the right decisions? What is really hitting him? He is like that, I agree with you. If you see that, he is there. But then identify the different types of decisions he is taking because of these anomalies.
So you already mentioned the decisions he has taken, in the sense like overconfidence, because he knew what is the industry. He dismissed the customer's demand for low cost, so he took the decision on not going for that. Also, he didn't, because he was overconfident, he did not estimate the severity of the downturn, so Sun piled up on losses. So those are the decisions he had taken.
He has taken those decisions. What sort of behavioral bias is working? Because he is taking those decisions. What the reason for his taking those decisions?
we have listed individual as a individual thinking he's working.
Yeah.
But there are places where they say that he has a certain rationale behind what decisions he's taking. So can he really say that it's individual?
See, here intuitive is coming with an idea that when he's talking about, see, he was a part of the internet economy. And when he says the recession, the thing will not last for so much time, because in his mind, internet, if you are in the internet line, you feel this thing, there are sharp edges, the thing. But when an economy is there, the thing, they are like this. Now, he was thinking that the American economy is representative of the internet economy. That is the reason that he thought that no, this recession will not last. This intuition which you mentioned about, the other name is affect heuristic. That you do everything on a gut feel. And here everything, what you are suffering from, a gross affect heuristic. Okay, then I'll take you through the case study now. Up till now what we have done is, we have only talked about behavioral anomalies, how it affects the individuals. Now we go a step ahead about how corporates make blunders when they are running organizations. This, since you know about the psychological phenomena, about the biases, I won't have to spend much time. When there is excessive optimism, managers, CEOs, they take on new projects and delay cost cutting during the business recession. It's because of their optimism. Overconfidence, they make inferior decisions. We'll come across all these decisions in the Sun Microsoft story. And because when you are cash rich, you tend to throw away that money. Then confirmation bias. We just did this morning that you want to only do certain things where you get information on, confirming it. And ultimately, when you are running an organization, you believe that you know everything about the organization and you relate everything around also with your knowledge. So you refer to 4 strong heuristics. What we really missed out when we are discussing is about the representativeness. Everyone got stuck up into Steve, what sort of a person he is. We forgot that how his decision making were based on certain biases. So when you have representativeness, you start choosing wrong projects. Secondly, availability. The press has so many words to tell about him. And when you choose wrong projects because the available information for him was also very different. Because he had been successful and he also believed in the internet so much that he ignored any other opportunities or the problems which could come. Then you had anchoring, when you are fixated on a number and you don't adjust insufficiently. And you have an affect heuristic, is when you start relying on only instincts rather than any formal valuation techniques. So these, along with framing effects, now these are again loss aversion and aversion to a sure loss, are something which we did in our first session regarding emotional biases. Losses always loom larger than gains of the same size. And aversion to sure loss is you start throwing money, good money after bad money. Now we tried to identify 2 sets of concepts, the psychological attributes of Scott McNally and decisions made by Sun's managers. I didn't much harp on decisions made by Sun managers because your case study does not cover that, because it's a very big case study where they are given step by step. But anyway, the psychological attributes to Scott McNally were quite right on what we thought about it. Now the challenge is, let's see what really Sun Microsystem was. Scott had a real good history of being willing to take on major risk. Everyone will agree with me. He would face a disaster by its horns. In fact, your article is mentioned adjectives as optimistic, smart, cocky, acrobatic, combative. Now these all things really talk about him to be one of the best managers at that point of time US had seen. See what he had done for the company. Leading manufacturer of servers. You're right, he should have been there where he was. Invented the Java programming language. He was founder of CEO and CEO of Sun Microsystems. Press were always full praises for him. Sun was a Wall Street favorite, so was its CEO. Sun stock price was $64 in 2000. You had every attribute about a great company. Now what happens? Good times. Sun made the first step. Had its own microprocessors against Motorola's. Very good, smart thing to do. It started investing in servers and started its own software, Solaris. And the result was, Sun was doing exceedingly well. Don't you think that it was a bold decision to substitute Sun own microprocessors against those of Motorola? What a wise decision. Secondly, here you went contrarian against the decision of the popular verdict to invest in servers that ran its own server. Now don't you think it was a very big contrarian call at that point of time? See, contrarian calls depends upon a situation. It's not doing something opposite for the sake of doing. All Sun's competitors were using Microsoft Windows OS. It was because of his past successes, that he went on increasing his spending on his R&D efforts. Now, I had mentioned about the stock prices. Not many people talked about stock prices. From 1997 to 2000, we had the stock markets were just going up one way, and technology stocks were in a frenzy. Sun stock at that time was at a P of 119 when it was around $64 a stock. If an investor had bought it in 1997, if you had bought this stock as well as an S&P index, the S&P would have doubled in the year 2000. But this stock got him richer by 14 times. Now, this is what happened with Sun. This was the first step of his not able to understand the realities. When you are a manager of a company, when your stock price is doing exceedingly well, you tend to be carried away by what the irrational exuberance is happening in the markets. It was the tech boom. Any technology stocks were just getting fantastic valuations. What McNally did was, he trusted the stock market prices. He believed that he was the best because his company stock price was quoting at such a high price. Now there were two things which happen in a market. One is, when you have craziness in the market, when you have irrational exuberance, and people lose their rationality, when they become irrational, they are willing to pay any price for a stock. They were doing the same thing with Sun stock. That's why blindly trusting the market prices can lead the best and the brightest managers to make big faulty decisions about investment policies, financings and acquisitions. These three things are the most dangerous part when the stock is listed. Now let's see how he had an illusion of control. This is also in the case study which a lot of you have missed. His past decisions had made him successful. And that's the reason he became intuitive in his decision making. When you have a series or string of successes, then you start believing in yourself so much that intuitively you start making decisions. In fact, he found himself so much in control in 1997 that against the wishes of his senior management, he opted out of using Intel chips, though they were 30% cheaper. This was his self-belief, intuitive, that no, I don't want Intel chips, we'll make our own Intel chips. And he believed that the R&D engineers had enough control over their production abilities to even fight Intel. Of course, 2004, Intel chips were twice as fast as this. And ultimately, Scott, in some of his interviews, he had agreed that this was his biggest blunder. Now, if you really go to see, during the technology boom, the concept was always outsourcing. You don't do what you can do, but you can always outsource. Now, who would go back into that thing? So, on one side, he was in the technology sector, one side he was not understanding, or he was not willing to understand the rules of the game. Now, there was a conference call with the analyst. Scott said, we don't have rolling waves, we seem to have real edges. Now, this was when the onset of the recession was there. Why did he say this? When the analysts asked him to cut costs, because all others were doing it, even Sun's managers, they were also doing the same thing. Now, this was because of his overconfidence in his knowledge and his ability to see the reality. Now, what does this say? We don't have rolling waves, we seem to have real edges. Had he was saying the recession cannot last long. Had he done some study about the US recession, of the past historical data, he would have realized that those recessions at least go on for at least 8 to 9 months before they ultimately change. Some of them really last longer also. But he had so much overconfidence about his knowledge, about everything, that he never went back to check on that. And that's why he makes a very startling statement. We don't have rolling waves, we seem to have real edges. Now, what behavioral bias was working? It was representativeness thinking which was working. Why representativeness? Because he considered the internet economy representative of the US economy. Because he was a part of the internet economy where recessions and booms, they just go up and down. 1997 to 2000, he was just going through this process. And all of a sudden he finds, oh, even if the recession is there, there's going to be sharp edges. This is what he says. The internet is still widely underhyped, underutilized and underimplemented. I think we are looking at the largest equipment business in the history of anything. The growth opportunities are stunning. In fact, he said to justify his stand on the recession being short-lived. Relatively, internet firms have a very short history. During this history, the growth rate in sales of a typical representative internet firm featured extreme movements up and down. But this representativeness led him to think that US recession also was short-lived. March 2001, Cisco lays off 18% of its workforce. Sun's executives wanted to follow suit. Scott refused. Why? Because he did not believe in that. Now here you see a confirmation bias, because anything which was against his intuition, against his knowledge, he did not want to touch it. And that's the reason he did not do any correction. More than calling him a contrarian, I would say that he suffered from a gross confirmation bias and an affect heuristic. The affect heuristic had seen his success. And when the downfall came, the representativeness of his stock price was also very sure in his mind, because he was anchored to that price. So, well, how can I go down? So at every point of time when a decision came, he thought his stock price was 64, why would it go down? So all his decisions, everything was based on something wrong happening with the markets, not with my firm. We touched this subject. Customers showed preference for low end. He didn't listen to them. He acquired Cobalt for $2 billion. Again, availability heuristic and intuitive judgment was at play. When customers were passing through tough times, asking Sun for low-end servers, this was a good information coming to him. It was a very good availability heuristic. But Scott did not pay any attention to it. You know what was the reason? Because at that time, he was involved in a suit against Microsoft. All his abilities that time were only on that Microsoft suit. And this has become so strong that it had become personal between him and Bill Gates. Thus, at the top of his recall volume, there was only one thing: Bill Gates and Microsoft. So when he had all these things on his mind, there was no way he could be thinking about anything else. So what happens was, he started neglecting his business, because something over there had become very personal for him. For him to win that case and not to lose that case was paramount. All of his time was being only spent on this. Again, his representative bias went wrong. The economic downturn lasted much more longer than what stock had predicted. Sun lost a third of its market share. The economic downturn actually lasted for about 9 months, which normally US recessions last. It lasted till November 2001. And it lasted much more for B2B businesses, because Sun was in the business of B2B. Overconfidence and excessive optimism led to the downfall. They could not see the reality as it existed, and thus again intuitive judgments and confirmation biases were very evident in his. What could have really contributed to his thought process? The thing was, why was he so aggressive in his growth forecast? It is because he was always anchored to the stock market price of Sun. Sun's earnings growth was every 50% every quarter. It was faster than Microsoft, Intel and Dell. So you can imagine that when he was having a direct case, a suit with Microsoft, he's always thinking, how can I be number one? But he forgot one thing: is this growth sustainable? Can he grow 50% every year? But this anchor was so strong for him that he was not willing to adjust. How many of you are going into the investment banking jobs? Okay, this will be useful to you. Now, in behavioral terms, this is known as the winner's curse. What is winner's curse? Is you are cursed if you are the winner. Is in a competitive bidding. When there is competition in bidding, everyone first comes out with the right assessment of a reflective thinking and starts putting in the bids. But as the bidding process goes on and on, the reflective thinking takes a back seat and egos start dominating. So the person who wins it ultimately ends up paying a higher price for the acquisition because he was thinking from his heart rather than the mind. It was his intuitive or ego thinking which was going on. So most of these competitive biddings are a case for winner's curse. Since all of you would be also getting your respective jobs at different places, you would be entering the era of real good competition, and it is also alike to a competitive bidding. Because every day you'll have to go to work and do something which you are not capable of, or which you believe you are capable of, but you cannot do it, or you don't believe in doing it, and you will, over a period of few months, will start taking part in the rat race. And remember one thing, even there if you win, you will still be the rat. You cannot go forward unless you are able to really control your emotions and stand by what you really want to do. At every point of time, just think with your mind. Don't get carried away with the heart. Don't get carried away with I'm getting so much, because that's all an illusion. I've already done that you'll be chasing only a carrot. The carrot will be going further and further away. Your self-control will start diminishing, and when that happens, you start being a genuine rat in the rat race. A loss disguised in a substantial win, which most often outweighs the winnings. First is the behavioral anomaly of herd mentality comes over here. What is herd mentality? Is our tendency to imitate others without thinking of the results. It is the mindless following of others irrespective of the logic of doing so. We see herd mentality so much. We saw it in the .com boom. Have you seen the herd mentality when you are at a traffic signal? If one car breaks the traffic, you have other 5-6 cars going after it. Because then everyone believes, oh, there is no cop over there, so let's go. So herd mentality is there. It would have been yesterday also. I have signed for both the lectures. So now if we don't go for the second, I am sure 4-5 would have thought of going and the rest would have followed. Because that's how human beings work. Not trying to run you down, but this is how the psychology works. So, in the financial world, one acquisition in an industry leads to several others, companies going for similar deals. Company managements go for acquisition, not because they're required to go for an acquisition, but because it has become the in thing to do, because the competitors are also doing it. Second anomaly is overconfidence. This refers to a higher confidence in oneself than is justified by the past results. We always overestimate our ability and knowledge, leading us to underreact to any new information that comes. So because of this, what do company managements do? They have an exaggerated notion of their ability to make an acquisition work. Believe me, acquisitions and mergers are the most difficult thing, because different types of cultures meet and very few really become successful in the long run. But CEOs, they are paid, they are overconfident that they'll be able to spot the right target and the right price and then show to their shareholders what they have done for the company. Then you have vividness. What is vividness? Why do people get attracted by this sort of action? Because every day the newspapers, today even you see in the newspapers, they bought this, he bought this firm bought this, this thing, now they are eyeing for this. All those people, all those industries, in the market. When every day they open the newspapers, they feel, oh, I have not been in the picture. Chala, then goes to the office and says, let's do something about it. That's how every day when you start hearing about different types of acquisition, different types of mergers, you have a vivid display which makes managements get up from their slumber and go in for acquisitions. If there is one successful deal, the investment banker will then talk about that deal to a whole lot of his clients, showing his genius that he'll be able to get them different types of deals on the table. And media also gives extensive coverage to all such deals. So what happens? Mergers and acquisition becomes fads in the markets. They become fancies of the market. CEOs go for them because it boosts their ego. But they make the investors in that company much more poorer because CEOs always are hurt by the winner's curse. This is what Tata Steel did. This was in 2007 when the markets were just booming. October 2006 they paid, their bid was 455. Jan 2007 they bid 608. Competitive bidding led to this. Integration is taking still long. Tech Mahindra, 58 per shares it bid. L&T 45.9 per shares. That's why Tech Mahindra won the bid. It had acquired at rupees 58 also 24% premium to the market. Before the bid, Tech Mahindra had bought Satyam stock at 55.7. Sold at 50.6, making a net loss. And L&T had already bought 12% of that stock. Both of these who were really in the run for acquisitions, in the same stock they had made losses. But the acquisition was not acquiring. Acquisition was, let's buy something very big in the market. Hindustan Lever, a blue chip stock. Nobody has two doubts about it. These were all its acquisitions. In the 90s, it was really definitely on an acquisition spree. But there, what happened was, they were only looking at growth and never realized the objective of providing value to the customers. All the managers, the CEOs, the only idea was how can we grow. And the trigger was so strong that Modern Foods acquisition was something which did not add any value to it. And the frequent price increases which the company had to give to finance all these acquisitions and all this loss of focus led to the competitors eating into the profits. So the competition took away quite a lot of market share. When they were going on an acquisition spree, Hindustan Lever was 50 times earnings. What does the market think? That Hindustan Lever will grow 50% every year. Similar to what we saw in Sun. That people thought, and even Scott thought, that this company is always going to grow. So ultimately these companies fell into the growth trap. This is what happened later on, and till date they are still trying to recover. So what do we conclude? Companies routinely pay higher for acquisitions due to competitive pressure. Deal-hungry investment bankers push the companies with fancy projections. So a vivid display of projections. And who loses? The investors of the acquiring company and those who bought the shares on news. And the only winners would be the investment bankers who get their hefty fees. Thank you.
But then I think synergy effect also is wrong.
What?
There might be synergy between the two.
No, it can be synergy, but I'm not telling there should not be any acquisitions and all. But how? The 3 case studies I gave you, how the managers, when in any competitive bidding, how you tend to drift away from your reflective thinking to your intuitive thinking. That was the idea of this. Of course, there have been mergers and acquisitions which have, but they are very rare. As long as, yes, a good merger, a good acquisition, if you really, had them in a good bear market, it will be very good. Because in a bear market, but why they come in bull markets? Because everyone is buying.